What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Mets Weekly podcast. I know things look a little different, background looks different. Carson is having some major technical difficulties, so major that I'm in charge now. It is a solo show, so you guys who missed me the past couple post games, now you only have me. So we make sure that everything works out. So welcome back to the Mets Weekly podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and X for post-game coverage of Mets versus Dodgers, Game 5 of the National League Championship Series. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to Mets Weekly YouTube channel for live recordings of this Mets Weekly podcast. Also, those of you watching on my channel, subscribe to that as well. It's greatly appreciated. For those of you watching live or on playback and want to join in the conversation, make sure to turn on post notifications to know when we go live. For those of you who are in the live chat right now, I want to let you know that we love reading your comments, questions, concerns. And if you feel like you're being ignored, you are not. They are just being starred throughout the show, and we or I will try to pull up as many as I can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Also, remember to follow Mets Weekly on X/Twitter and TikTok for future content during the upcoming off season. And for our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on any of your favorite listening platforms. Do not miss the audio version of the new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day. And for those of you tuning in on audio right now, make sure to tune into the pregame shows. They're usually 90 minutes before the game. That'll be going on all Mets postseason long on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, let's get into the postgame show. So there is a lot to go into. The New York Mets getting the victory tonight against those Los Angeles Dodgers, 12-6. So this was a bit of a crazy one. So we got a lot of people in here already. We got our buddy Ibby over from the Till Mets Do Us Part podcast. We have Caution, High Donor, Uncle Stevie's nephew himself. We got Will White. We'll get into Marte later. So we have a lot of things to get to. We got Yuki in here. So a lot of good stuff. And for this Mets team, it had been a struggle so far coming back to Citi Field, particularly offensively. We had seen the Dodgers looking like they were in a separate league than the Mets. They were scoring tons of runs just constantly. And then for the Mets, a lot of struggles on the offensive end, stranding runs in scoring position. And even tonight, they still went 5 for 19 with runners in scoring position, despite putting up 12 runs. They just had so many opportunities tonight that no matter what, they were just bound to score eventually. I mean, when you have 19 opportunities, you're bound to get at least a few to cross over home plate. So that definitely was encouraging for the Mets to get this offense going. And one of the big takeaways for me when I'm looking at this offense is that we know Vientos has had a phenomenal postseason. He's been like a postseason hero, been one of the best guys in all of Major League Baseball this postseason, really making a name for himself, becoming a star right before our very eyes. And he actually goes 0 for 5 today. And the New York Mets still score 12 runs. Francisco Lindor, we know he's been an MVP for this team. He's been phenomenal all year long. Well, tell you what, in runs and scoring position, say he was 0 for 2. So he was part of that 5 for 19. So a lot of the guys who have been massive contributors for you, they don't do too much, yet you still put together 12 runs. So I think that's really encouraging. And it was from some other guys stepping up who weren't having the best of series, but it's still nice to see them step up. As Will mentioned, Starling Marte, I mean, he had a massive day today, going 4 for 5, driving in 3 runs. And for Marte, he's rocking a new chain. So I'm just going to credit to that. I'm going to say it's a good luck chain. So I'm just going to give the props to the new chain he's wearing. And my guy, to go along with that, Francisco Alvarez, he had a massive game as he gets 3 hits. So that was very nice to see. And for Alvarez, we know it's been a struggle for him this postseason so far. So for him to get 3-hit game, hoping it's something he could build on. He was more aggressive. He was not in between. We've kind of seen that with Alvarez. There have been some approach concerns, you could say, where he looks in between. Does he want to swing? Does not want to swing? So it's just really good to see Francisco Alvarez getting the job done. I do apologize for the bouncing camera. I've had camera issues myself. So it's just been a tough day for technology. I'll tell you what, it's been a tough day for technology for all of us. So for the Mets, they decide to go, now we're looking at the pitching. David Peterson makes the start. And I found that very fascinating. I really feel like when it comes down to it, they wanted to go to Senga. We talked about there's pretty high expectations with Senga. They want him to be their ace. They gave him a good amount of money, so they want him to be a big contributor for them. And we saw how game 1 went, did not go well. Maybe he goes back to the game 5 outing, and he had mechanic problems. So I'm wondering if maybe those still haven't been sorted out, because it felt like maybe the Mets didn't have too much confidence in him, and that could be as to why they did not go to him today. And they said, you know what, we're not going to risk it. We're not going to take any chances. We'll go to David Peterson. And David Peterson, he's had very good moments for the Mets this postseason in both series. In Milwaukee, he got the save. Philadelphia, he had some nice outings. So going up against this Dodgers team, it definitely is a bit of a different circumstance. But overall, he gave you a good game. The one thing I didn't like was the 4 walks. That's going to happen with Peterson. We know that he does have those troubles when it comes to trying to stay in the zone, not walking batters. That definitely has been his biggest struggle his whole career. Been a problem for this Mets team overall in the rotation, in the bullpen. The walks have been far too much in this series against the Dodgers. And to have those 4 walks, he had to really dodge a lot of jams. You know, he gave up 6 hits as well. So there was a lot of traffic on the bases, but for the most part, Peterson was able to work his way out of it, particularly in that first inning. I mean, things get off to a quick start when Ohtani gets a hit. Mookie Betts gets a hit right after him. And then, it's up to David Peterson to really be able to settle down. And he did that. He was able to get out of that jam, get Teoscar Hernandez out, get Freddie Freeman out, and keep the Mets moving. So we have more people joining in, so we'll say what's up to everybody. We got Ricardo in here. We got Christopher. So we have Stony. We have a lot of our loyal listeners who have consistently been in here. We want to thank you for that. So we really do appreciate that. But as we move along, the Mets, they actually get out to the lead early. And that was a big key, because that kind of changes the way you're maybe approach this a little bit. And also you have to consider this was an elimination game for the Mets. I mean, the Dodgers had 3 wins. So the Mets, they couldn't take any risks. They couldn't take any chances. It's one of those situations where if a guy doesn't have it, you pull the trigger right away. So I do like that Mendoza took that approach. So for Peterson, only gets 3 and 2/3 innings, which on the 3rd consecutive day of playing baseball, not ideal. But with the blowouts the Mets have had and the sacrificing of guys like Tyler McGill, of Danny Young, the Mets had an opportunity here where, even though they did not get a long outing from David Peterson, they still had some other guys they could go to. First man up was Reed Garrett, and Garrett did an okay job. I mean, they get an inning out of him. He was able to get a big strikeout, but he did give up 3 runs in his own right, so that definitely was frustrating. But one of the big heroes in this bullpen, Ryan Stanek, follows it up 2 1/3 score. I mean, not scores, but he gave the 1 home run, but 4 strikeouts. But what I like from Stanek, no walks. So that definitely is very nice to see from Stanek, as far as a guy that, like, we've talked about, someone in this bullpen needs to step up. We know the concerns about losing Brooks Raley, losing some other guys like Daniel Nunez. So you want to see some other relievers step up. Ryan Stanek is a guy who has postseason pedigree, postseason experience, and he really showed that tonight. He did a very good job of giving the Mets some much-needed length, going 2 1/3 innings. That definitely is a Mets high for Ryan Stanek, and he threw only 31 pitches, so he was effective. He was aggressive, and when you have the big lead, that's how it's supposed to be. I mean, that's what my big criticism of the walks, especially, is that when you're up by a good margin, don't walk batters. Don't give them opportunities to come back into the game. So I really like Stanek's approach here. That was very nice to see. Speaking of nice to see, Edwin Diaz, he was really great as he pitched the 8th and 9th inning, only giving up 1 hit to Tommy Emmy at the end. He had a couple strikeouts, but also no walks from Edwin Diaz. And that's really big for Diaz, especially because Stanek is a guy who, with the Mets in the playoffs, has not really walked batters. But Diaz, we know that occasionally he gets amped up, loses the strike zone. But I feel like with the big lead that the Mets had, Diaz was very calm, cool, collected, and he looked great. So that was big. I didn't love the decision to have him go the 2nd inning, being up 6 runs, but honestly, with how tired the Mets bullpen has been, how bad it's been, not the worst choice in the world. So for Diaz, he was fine. What I like is that even though he threw 2 innings, it was only 23 pitches. So overall, it works out. It was fine. The Mets have the off day tomorrow before they travel to Los Angeles for a big game 6. And I'll preview that a little bit, but we will have our pregame show hopefully on Sunday, like we said, usually 90 minutes before the ball game. So let's get into some other things. Caution asks a really good question right here. Do I think that the Dodgers punted like Jim Riley of Ballcap Sports thinks? I don't think so. I mean, Dave Roberts is a strange fellow, no doubt, but I don't think you want to risk it. I feel like for the Dodgers, they had mentioned this on the broadcast, but the Dodgers want to win this game. I mean, you have to think that you want to go to the World Series, and here's why. Because of the game 6 pitching matchup. Now, the Dodgers are going to go to another bullpen game, it seems like, in game 6. So you don't want to tire your bullpen out going into the World Series. I think that, when it comes to the World Series, you would ideally like to have as much rest as possible. So I don't really think that the Dodgers punted this game. I don't think they showed the most effort in trying to win the game on the flip side. So I could definitely understand where some theories may come from, especially when you look at what the Dodgers did with Brett Honeywell. I thought that was very, very fascinating. And the reason why is because the last time the Dodgers did the bullpen game, Honeywell was great for them. I mean, he was the guy that actually was able to kind of settle things down because the Mets were getting off to a very quick start. They had gotten 6 runs on the board, and then Honeywell came into the game. He gave them a few scoreless, and it kind of stabilized things. So I thought he was going to be a very big key to the game 6 of the bullpen matchup, but he was the guy that really had to wear it for the Dodgers as he threw 67 pitches. So we will not be seeing Brent Honeywell in game 6. So I'm kind of curious who's going to be the bulk guy, so to speak, for the Dodgers. I mean, unless they really just want to get creative and they want to say, you know what, we have faith in Michael Kopech and Evan Phillips and Blake Trinan, and we're just going to have those guys do the majority of the work. Maybe see a little bit of Brazier, a little bit of Banda. You saw him get the one out later on. So they could do that as well. They could go to Landon Knack again, but he's the guy who gave up the grand slam. So I am very fascinated to see, like, even though the Dodgers are doing a bullpen game, how are they actually going to approach it? So, but on the Mets for the flip side, Duran comes in here saying game 6 Manaea, game 7 Senga. I'm not sure. I don't know about that one. Manaea definitely for game 6, but I feel like with Senga, game 7, it's asking a lot. It really is. I understand, again, he's paid to be the ace. You want him to be the ace, but he just hasn't had the reps this year. It's hard. It's really, really hard for a guy to miss pretty much the entire regular season. He made one start for us and he was gone again for months. And he gets to make one start against the Phillies, throw a couple innings, throws a couple of innings against the Dodgers this series. Now you say, okay, now go do game 7 of the NLCS in Los Angeles. It's a tough ask for anybody, and it's a really tough ask for a guy who hasn't really been here all that long this year. So I definitely don't see that happening. I feel like they're going to stick with Severino, and that's going to be interesting. But I could see Senga being a bullpen option, maybe. Again, it depends on if his mechanics are working, because if they're not, it's pointless. If you're going to go out there and not be effective, it ruins the point. Now, maybe there's a scenario where Luis Severino gets into trouble early and he's really struggling, and you kind of have to pull the plug because it's game 7 and you have no other options. So you could go to Senga really early if that happens. Like you get a Pearson-like start, unless you want to try this whole thing of like Garrett Stanek Diaz. That also kind of depends what happens game 6. I expect another great outing from Sean Manaea, but he does get into some trouble in that 5th inning, 6th inning, and that even though Manaea is not going to give up a lot of runs, if he's not going deep with innings, you're still going to have to use these other guys that we're talking about. You're still going to use your Garrett, your Stanek, your Diaz. So if you're using them on Sunday, you don't have them for as many innings Monday. So I do think that there is a chance that Senga could be a very nice bullpen option for a hopeful game 7. You got to win game 6 first, but and M Easy that makes a really good point. Thinks that we finally get a good close game in game 6. Listen, I'll take another blowout on the Mets side winning the game. I mean, I don't really want a close game unless, it's been a weird series, no doubt. I mean, it's just been kind of all over the place. It's very put you on an emotional roller coaster because you watch the Mets get blown out game 1. You're like, oh my gosh, look at this Dodgers team. Then the Mets do really good game 2. You're like, okay, we're good now. Then game 3 happens. Then game 4 happens. And you're like, oh, things are looking really bad for us. Then the Mets put a nice game 5. And you're like, what are we doing here? So it's been a very confusing series. Will we get a close game? Maybe. I mean, I would think that if the game 7 happens, I think that was a close one. Victor Hernandez, he was at Citi Field and it was rocking. It sure was. I mean, the Mets definitely need all the help they could get, and they're hoping to come back to Citi Field. So If they do, it would be in the World Series if it happens in the year of 2024. So that definitely was a great game to go to. I bet you definitely enjoyed it. We have Carson, my fellow co-host. Rough day for technology, but I'll be back on Sunday, folks. So there you go. The big return date. So we know that Carson's available for Game 6. So we'll see who else might be in store. So it definitely was really nice to see. We have another one coming here talking about Mania. You just want Mania to pitch the game of his life come Sunday. Also want Mendoza to start Winker and McNeil again. So that is a big storyline today. Will White had also mentioned it. No matter what, Winker should be in the lineup for the next 2 games. And I totally agree. I mean, Jesse Winker has had a really strong postseason for this Mets team. OPS over 1,000. And it's really crazy to think about when you think about it like that. That, like, here's a guy, OPS over 1,000 in the postseason, been swinging a good bat, one of your only left-handed hitters, and we know this Mets team is very right-handed heavy, and this Dodgers pitching is very right-handed heavy. So it would make you think that you would want to use your left-handed bat. But Carlos Mendoza has shown a really puzzling loyalty to JD Martinez. That, you know what, JD Martinez is our guy. We have to use him. He needs to make starts for us. He was a big part of why we got here in the first place. I kind of disagree with that. He had his good moments when he first got here, no doubt. Culture, leadership, sure. But overall, Jesse Winker is the better play. Jesse Winker has had a much better postseason, and he showed it today. I mean, he had a big triple. He had 2 hits in this game overall. He drove in a run, got a walk, also got hit by a pitch. So Winker was on the base paths 4 times tonight. JD Martinez has not been on the base path 4 times. And I know JD Martinez thrown some walks, but what I don't like about JD Martinez is that I do find that he's a bad matchup against this Dodgers pitching staff. This Dodgers pitching staff is relying on chases on the outside corner in the dirt, curveballs, the sliders that you've seen from the Jack Flaherty, Yamamoto, Bueller, all these different guys. I feel like JD Martinez, he loves to fish at those. So having a guy like Jesse Winker, who's much more patient at the plate, and if you miss with those outside corners to righties, that's actually in the lefty's wheelhouse. So I really like having Jesse Winker there. His personality, I feel like it fits New York, fits the postseason vibe. He's a guy who gets really fired up, and I do enjoy watching it. So we do have some more things going on. Let's see what else we got here. Reed Garrett's big one. He definitely had the big out, getting the strikeout against Freddie Krueger, Freddie Freeman. And I also saw Jeff McNeil. So McNeil's an interesting game for him. He goes hitless 0 for 3, but he does have 2 sacrifice flies. So you kind of take what you want with it. You want to see the hits, but with the struggles that the Mets have had with runners in scoring position in this series, they haven't really gotten many sacrifice flies. You know, Jeff McNeil almost had a sacrifice fly last night too, but you had an injured Brandon Nimmo running at third base. He was not going to be scoring there. So for McNeil, I was glad to see him do something productive. And I just think that, you know, you want to stick with Jeff McNeil, go for it. Iglesias, he got us really far, had a great year overall, high batting average, good OPS, great with runners on, great with 2 strikes, 2 outs. The numbers look great. Defense great. Vibes great, singing great, song great, but overall right now, again, against this Dodgers pitching staff that is very right-handed heavy, it's nice to have a left-handed bat in there. So for Jeff McNeil, you can stick with him for Game 6, see how it goes, and you just see what you get. I mean, because there have been a lot of times where this Mets team, like, even though they haven't gotten hits or runs in scoring position, there have been opportunities where you can still score without getting hits. They have not done well in sacrifice fly scenarios. So to see Jeff McNeil get 2 of them, and he almost had a third one last night, at least it's something. You know what I mean? At least the guy's putting bat on ball. One of the other things I haven't liked about Iglesias in this series is the amount of double plays he's into. That's been very frustrating to watch because here you are, you're trying to make a rally. You're struggling with men on base. One swing turning into 2 outs, that definitely is very frustrating to watch. So let's see what else we have. Stoney's heading out here. Have a good night. Thank you, Stoney. You as well. And then, you know, the question of Iglesias or McNeil, and the Christopher saying you stick with McNeil. So we'll see what they decide. I feel like they are going to give him one more shot getting those sacrifice flies. Marcus asks, what will happen with Pete? So Pete is an interesting one because he did hit the huge 3-run homer in the first inning on a pitch that was really low, almost in the dirt. I was surprised to see him take that one out to center field. That was not an easy pitch to hit out. So I definitely give Alonso credit there. But what was interesting is that after the game, the Fox broadcast interviewed Pete Alonso, David Ortiz, and all those guys. And afterwards, Pete Alonso did a bit of a bow to the crowd, and he was like smiling and waving. So by all accounts, Pete Alonso wants to be a New York Met. He's been here his whole career, done a lot of community work. He wants to stay. And I feel like the New York Mets would like to keep Pete Alonso. But where does Scott Boras want Pete Alonso to go? Does he want him to be a Met? Maybe. But overall, what he wants is the place that's going to give Pete Alonso the biggest payday. So it's going to be up to Pete Alonso. Is he going to be a man, or is he just going to listen to what his agent says? Is he just going to let the money decide where he ends up? If I'm the Mets right now with what I've seen from Pete Alonso, he's gotten you a few big hits this postseason, today included. Hit against the Brewers was absolutely massive. Got some nice hits against the Phillies. I'll give him a fair deal. I wouldn't give him too far from what's been rumored, what's been reported of what the Mets have offered Pete Alonso. I think it's a totally fair deal considering his age. So if the Mets could offer it again, something pretty similar to it. If he says no, he says no. I'm not going to overpay. I mean, that's what it comes down to, especially with the years. Player is 30 years old. You just know with any sport, anytime a guy hits his 30s, you start to go on the decline. So first few years might look good, but those next few years, you're not really sure what's going to happen. The one thing that Pete Alonso has going for him over a lot of other athletes once they hit their 30s, he's not a guy that's injury prone. The only times that Pete Alonso's missed time is when he gets hit by pitches by other teams. He's not a guy that he has a glass lower half, like we like to say with a guy like Marte. Not a guy that has a hamstring, an ankle, and a knee, and he's just always something going on. He's been relatively healthy his whole career. So that's something that I don't worry about. It's not someone where you worry about like his body breaking down or things like that. But it's more so just like, can you keep that overall effectiveness, keep your bat speed, things like that. We know he doesn't have much foot speed. That's not going to get better with time. So it's something to have to consider. Maybe those last few years of the deal, he becomes a DH. I'm totally fine with that because as you get older, trying to dig ground balls out the dirt and make those big stretches that first base requires, it can become challenging. Ask Freddie Freeman how that's going with a bad ankle. It's not a fun time. So for Pete, I think he stays. I feel like the Mets give him a decent contract. Whether he accepts it, there remains to be seen. But what he could do for the time being, go hit another one. Go have another great moment, this time in Los Angeles. You keep doing that, your chances of staying a New York Met increase greatly. Because the way I look at it is that Steve Cohen is going to say, you give me a championship, I'll give you a lot of money. Because that's what he wants overall. We know it's what he's trying to do is win a championship. So if Pete Alonso shows that I'm a big piece of that, I'm one of the things that can give you a championship, then you pay the man. So we'll see how it ends up. So we have some comments about Iglesias here. Biggest Iglesias supporter there is, but he has been lost at the plate in this series. It's been a struggle. I mean, I do hope that the OMG magic is not wearing out. Like I said, it's been such a great year for him. But also, as we know, it was very unexpected. I mean, this was a guy that, as we know the whole story, we've heard it a bunch of times, but was not in the major leagues last year, signed a minor league deal this year. So we'll kind of see if it's kind of coming down to earth. Definitely is not an opportune time for it to happen, but I think there is some concerns there. If I'm Pete, I would be a man and carry us to the final dance. We don't care about you right now, Scott Boras. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that, like, he can't think about the contract right now. He just has to focus on trying to get this Mets team as far as he can because for Pete, this is his real, true first postseason run. I mean, you had your wild card series in 2022. That was 3 games. It can't do too much with that. But here he's had a much bigger sample size. And while the results have been mixed, he's had big hits. And that's really what it comes down to. You come through in big moments and it kind of erases some of the other stuff that happens. So look at Paul Goldschmidt, the guy aged overnight. It could happen at any time. I mean, that's a great point, Ricardo. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt is a guy who's like MVP caliber every year. But now this year with the Cardinals, I mean, he was just not the same guy. He was awful. And one of the main reasons why the Cardinals did not make the postseason this year. And now he's going to be a free agent. And I don't think he's getting a big payday. I do wonder where he's going to end up. He's going to be a fascinating situation to follow. Paulshin makes a great point here. I'm really surprised Bader hasn't gotten injured. Now, you talk about injury-prone players. I mean, that's been Harrison Bader's life story. He's had a lot of injuries. And for the Mets, they played a pretty pretty often earlier in the season, and they gave him a lot of consecutive days. He had that neck thing for a little bit where he hit into the wall, and the Mets kind of he had sparse playing time. But overall, Bader's been out there a lot, but he stayed healthy. Let's see what Marcus has about Pete here. I have a new position on Pete. If Mets cannot trade for Vlad Jr., keep Pete. If they can land Vlad Jr., let Pete walk. I like it. I mean, Vlad Jr., he would be obviously an amazing addition, but we'll get to the offseason stuff in the offseason. Let's see what else we have. Arizona should have kept Goldie when he was there years and years ago. You could have. I mean, the package, it's looking kind of mixed. I feel like with Arizona, they don't really give out the crazy, crazy contracts. And, St. Louis gave him a big payday. And then Nolan Arenado struggling as well. That's a big one, too. And as we know, a lot of Met fans were, I want Arenado. I don't want Lindor. Lindor's no good. Oh, Jimenez, what happened? Trade's looking pretty good now. I'll tell you what. I mean, that definitely is looking pretty good. Andres Jimenez has been a struggle. Ahmed Rosario is out of the Cleveland organization. He's been bouncing around. He was actually on this Dodgers team, and they let him go as well. So that trade is looking pretty good for the Mets right now. And obviously, I have to talk about Francisco Alvarez, don't I? I mean, the man had 3 hits. He drove in a run. He looked much better at the plate. No strikeouts tonight. So I was very glad to see that. And you know what? There was concerns. I mean, I had them too. He definitely has struggled this postseason, especially in this series. It's been a rough go for him. But to see Alvarez have a really nice game, that was awesome to see. I'm hoping he could build on it. And, we'll see how it goes. I don't want him to get too confident and too aggressive, but, it was a quick turnaround, because as a young player, you're trying to see the kid develop, and when you're struggling, it's easy to have the mental aspect really weigh on you and kind of bring you down, and you're like, oh, maybe I'm not ready for this moment, and it could hurt your confidence. But he says he's the best, so he definitely looked really good tonight. So I was thrilled to see that. They got Christian Walker. They did well on letting Goldie go. And listen, and now Christian Walker's a free agent too. So, we'll see what happens there. I mean, I know there are some Met fans that do like that they could maybe get a Christian Walker if P. Alonso doesn't stay. Christian Walker has a good defense, pretty good batting average, hits home runs, but his age is up there as well. He had an oblique thing this year for Arizona. So he's a guy that's going to be out there, and we'll see where he ends up as well. Mets need to shop for pitchers. Totally agree. I mean, it's going to be interesting because this rotation has gotten them so far, but almost all this rotation is not going to be here next season. I mean, all their contracts are gone. So it's going to, again, like we say, it takes two to tango. So I feel that how the season has gone, the way the pitchers have been embraced by the city, I feel like Manaea wants to stay. I definitely think Severino wants to stay. And once again, the Mets are going to offer both of them deals, fair deals. If they take it, they take it. If they don't, they don't. So we'll kind of see where that goes. But as far as like the pitching overall, the Mets could use some more high leverage bullpen arms. Brooks Raley, he's also going to be a free agent. Daniel Nunez, you don't know what he's going to be once he comes back because he was another guy who was a great story. He's a guy you never heard of before. And then he comes in and he was phenomenal. It doesn't always happen again. You could say the same for Reed Garrett. Reed Garrett is another guy who kind of came out of nowhere. We weren't expecting this good of a season for him. So is that something that could continue happening? We hope. There's no guarantee. Ryan Stanek, he's also a free agent at the end of the season. He's been solid for us this postseason. I'd like to keep him. But maybe someone offers him a closer role. And the Mets are not going to be being able to do that. So we'll see how that goes. Phil Maton, he's a guy that has a club option at the end of the year. Are the Mets going to pick that up? I don't know. I mean, at the end of the regular season, I would have said 100% yes, but right now, I'm kind of leaning towards no. And it's a shame because he had always been great in the postseason, but not this go round. Let's see what else we have. We have Carson. I just pick up Tommy Edman and ruin him so we can never see him again. It's certainly an option. I mean, Tommy Edman, he's a guy that he holds a lot of value. I mean, we've seen him at the plate in this series, but he's a player that he does so many things. I mean, he could play just about anywhere in the field. You put him in the outfield, you put him in the infield, switch hitter, tough out. Looks good in this postseason, but I don't think the Mets are going to be doing that. For the Mets, we want them to be a little more power hungry, hunt more power, younger players, hopefully from the left side a little bit. Switch hitter would be great too, but overall, I don't think that's going to be on the Mets priority list. It's going to be a rough repeat. There's a lot of free agent first basemen: Jake Berger, Carlos Santana, Christian Walker. Again, we'll see how it goes. I mean, there are teams that certainly could use a Pete Alonso too, whether he is his normal self or if he's kind of in between. Obviously, Seattle comes to mind. Houston, after the Jose Abreu experiment didn't work. The Cubs, we'll see what happens with Bellinger. I could see them being involved. So there's going to be suitors. I mean, there are going to be teams interested in Pete Alonso, but is anyone going to top that offer the Mets gave him? I'm not sure. I mean, he's gonna again need a really big postseason, and if that happens, I think the Mets will offer him a big offer too. So we'll see how it all shakes out. So anyway, but overall, it was just good to see the Mets also really take advantage of Jack Flaherty. That's a very interesting thing here because Jack Flaherty, he looked lights out in game one. Mets couldn't touch him. Jack Flaherty looked like an ace again. But then today, 3 innings, 8 hits, 8 runs, 4 walks, 0 strikeouts. That's pretty crazy. Considering how many strikeouts Jack Flaherty had in game one, for him to just be the opposite today, I found that very fascinating, and I was glad to see it. And if the Mets are going to go win this series, they need to do the same to Walker Buehler in game seven. They need to actually make him come back down to earth, show that he's not all that great, and actually take advantage and do big damage. So I really like to see that the Mets showed improvement here, that they made some adjustments, and they just looked a lot better. Here's another option. Viento's playing first base and signing Bregman. It's another option. It's something that I thought about, but I'm kind of not for it. I don't love Vientos going to first base. I have to be honest. If Vientos is going to move off a third, I want him to go to DH. While it seems like first base is not the most difficult position to play, you can just kind of put anybody over there. If you're not experienced at first base, it's not a fun time because when a ball's thrown in the dirt and you got to dig it out, Mark Vientos is just not a great defensive player. So I don't see him becoming this guy that's going to make these great saves at first base and these wonderful stretches and be saving some errors. And I just don't see that. I would rather, if I'm going to get a new first baseman, I want an experienced one who knows the position, could catch the scoops, can make the plays they need to at first base. And if Vientos is moving off a third and Bregman's the bat that you decide to bring in, who he's not on top of my priority list. There are some other bats that I like more. Obviously, everyone likes Juan Soto more. I like Santander more. Some other corner outfielders I like to add in that department. I feel like with Bregman, he's another guy that he's on the decline. I mean, he had a good year this year, but he's getting to that age where all of a sudden things start to go downhill. So I wouldn't be all for it. The money, it kind of depends on it, but I just think that it seems like a simple concept. It's like, oh, we'll just move Vientos over to first. He'll be fine. And he could. I mean, he could, but I just don't like banking on that. I just think that, just trying to do a new position, it just doesn't always work that way. So I feel like if I'm going to move him off a third, and listen, I mean, to me, I would consider maybe giving Mauricio a shot at third with his body type, see how that goes. If Mauricio turns into a good third baseman, then Vientos becomes an amazing DH. So it is interesting. And yeah, and here's the point. First base is the most difficult. You have to catch all the throws from third base, second base, and shortstop, and stop the hit by the first baseman. Harper isn't good at first base. And that's the thing. So, I mean, Bryce Harper is actually a great athlete compared to Vientos. And I thought overall in the series the Mets played against Philly, he did well. He was able to make some nice plays. But again, it's not that simple. If you just kind of do it all of a sudden. Here's a good one. Want the Mets to call the Marlins about Alcantara this offseason. You and everybody else. I mean, I would absolutely love Sandy Alcantara, but I just don't see the Marlins dealing in a division like that, especially with the Mets. I feel like even if the Mets offered the best deal, the Marlins wouldn't take it because they are the Marlins. Here's another one. Wait a minute. If Mets sign Soto, then you let Marte DH every day, which will take stress off the knee and he'll play a lot more. That's another one where it's like, if I'm going to move Marte off the outfield, I'm moving him off the team. I just think that when Marte, he's had a good series. Obviously, he was great today, 4 hits, but we still have not seen this guy hit a home run since June. You can't have a DH that can't hit a home run. I mean, that just seems counterproductive. That is, honestly, I think it kind of loses the point. So for me, for Marte, if you can get an upgrade in the corners, sure, but he's not someone I'm looking to DH. If he's not in the outfield, I'm looking to move him because he doesn't provide the defense he once did. He doesn't provide the speed he once did. So he's a guy that you're not really sure what you're going to do with him. Unless you want to get crazy and move Nimmo back to center and then stick Marte in left field or something like that. Or stick Soto in left field if that happens. I mean, we're getting really pipe dream now, but it's another thing that I don't think it's just the easiest solution. What else do we have here? Ricardo, I really want Vientos to stay at third. I would give him another offseason, work with someone like David Wright to improve. I mean, that would be great. I feel like Soto would be, I'm not sorry, I mean, David Wright is definitely a great person to learn from, the captain. And Lindor's worked with Vientos on footwork and things like that, so I'm sure they'll keep working on it. So, and as young as Vientos is, he definitely could still improve at the third base position as far as, the footwork. But overall, we've seen Vientos run the bases. He's not the fleetest of foot. He's a big guy. I mean, it's not just going to happen. So he's never going to all of a sudden get great range. Maybe he can get a better first step reaction, things like that. But he's not all of a sudden going to become fast and have range going left and right. So it's something that you might see some improvements as he develops, but he's never going to become like this great third baseman. And overall, he's been perfectly fine this year. I mean, with the bat that he gives you, some of the defensive shortcomings you'll take, but again, all in all, it really hasn't been that much. He's been solid over there. He's been perfectly fine. Definitely not another inexperienced young player at third next season. Notes Mauricio. You do it in spring training. You give it a shot. I mean, there's nothing wrong in spring training with getting some reps. See how it goes. I mean, I'm and listen, or if Mauricio maybe starts the year in the minors, let him get some reps there. I'm not. I think it's worth a shot. Why Soto? Soto will take a big chunk of the cap, can get 3 awesome pitchers for Soto price. Soto does a lot for you. I mean, listen, he had a home run tonight. He really changes everything of a ball club. I mean, he's a guy that you give him a big chunk, but he has that kind of impact. Soto is not a good right fielder. Rather put him in left. Would you believe me if I told you Juan Soto was a finalist for Gold Glove in right field this year? It's crazy because I agree with you, Will. Juan Soto has not been great in the outfield. Definitely not. But finals for Gold Glove. And he should be in left field. He really should. But we'll see what happens. But he's not a defensive upgrade, no doubt about it. We got Lane in here. Let's go Mets. Can the Mets win Game 6 and Game 7? The Mets have a great shot at Game 6. Game 7, it could go either way. I mean, what version of Walker Buehler are you going to get? Are you actually going to get Severino step up and actually have a big start for you, work deep into the game? Is the Mets going to catch the ball this time? Is Severino going to catch the ball? Is Alvarez not going to do dumb things? Then they have a better shot. Let's see. Who tells Vientos to stand? Who tells Vientos where to stand for every batter? I don't think he's always getting the right advice. Could be the hitting coaches, could be Chavez, could be Barnes, could be anybody. But I think overall, with the offensive season that Mark Vientos has had, where he's standing, he can stay where he's at. I'm totally good with it. He's had a phenomenal year, had an amazing postseason. So I'm not looking to change anything about him offensively. He has great power to just kind of hit everything to left field, hit everything over to right field. So we can move on to the next part. The season isn't over yet. No more offseason talk. The boss is telling me it's time to get to studs and duds. So my stud of the game, this is a tough one, but I'm going to give it to Pete Alonso. Hitting the big 3-run homer, and especially doing it in the first inning, is key. Getting the Mets on the board, getting them to settle down, just with all of the struggles that the Mets had offensively in this series, especially in Citi Field the past couple of days, to see Pete Alonso hit the huge 3-run homer to really have us settle down and feel like we have a shot and get everybody going and kind of igniting the team, he really got them going. So I definitely have him as my stud. As far as my dud, I'm going to go with, let's see who won't go. I guess I'll go with Tyrone Taylor. He went over 3 today. He had the walk, but overall, he had some other opportunities, wasn't able to come through. He went over 3 with runs in scoring position today. So overall, I'm going to give Tyrone Taylor as my dud, but overall, he's been perfectly fine. He's a defensive first player, so I think that's what we got. Dud Garrett, that's definitely a very good one. So we still have some Soto talk. We got talks about throwing from third base to first base. And Vientos has a great arm. That definitely is huge when you're a third baseman. I totally agree with that. Yeah, and Soto, and that's true. I mean, Soto plays in a baby park, so anything hit past him is probably over the wall. So he doesn't have too much ground to cover. That's a very good point, Ricardo. We have more stuff about defense. Stanek as a stud, no doubt. I mean, he really was really great. No dud. I like that. Good question. Do you sign Alonso, Manaea, and Severino, and Quintana, and Danny Young, and Alex Young, and Ottavino? Not many of them. I re-sign Manaea for sure. Maybe Pete, maybe Sevy. The rest of those guys, no. We also had Pajes and Alvarez chirping. That definitely was pretty interesting. And for Pajes, it looks like this game really got him going. I mean, here's the guy who's batting number ninth in the order for the Dodgers. And for Pajes, he hits 2 home runs in this game from that number nine spot. And, he's chirping with Alvarez, but then Alvarez has a big game as well. So it's something to monitor. And I hope that all of a sudden Pajes doesn't get hot, because as great as this Dodgers lineup is, that's the last thing you need, is somebody in the bottom half to all of a sudden get really hot. That would be very frustrating, because we've already seen what Tommy Edman has done. But the one thing the Mets have going for them is the struggles of Freddie Freeman. That guy is just not healthy right now. I mean, we talk about Nimmo really battling through his injury, but Freeman is just really going through it. He is not the same guy at all, and it happens. So that it is what it is. Teoscar, I'm still waiting for him to break out. It could happen at any moment. Mookie Betts has finally woken up these past couple of days. Otani's always a threat. So it's a tough lineup. I mean, from top to bottom, Max Muncy, his immaculate streak finally got snapped. So that was good to see, because, I mean, this guy just could not get out. The Mets have had like 30 walks this series, and at least 12 of them have to be to Max Muncy. So to finally not, I mean, he still drew a walk today, but to get him to strike out twice, that was really good to see. Let's see what else we have. Prefer Kike Hernandez in the field over Soto. Save a big chunk of money. I don't think Kike's coming here. I think that, they had a chance to get him. They were talking to him a few years ago, but overall, he ends up back with the Dodgers eventually, some way, somehow, after being with the Red Sox. So Kike just feels like a Dodger no matter what, no matter where he goes. He's just a postseason hero, big personality. He'd fit the Mets for sure with the Puerto Rican connection with a lot of the other guys on the team. I feel like him and Lindor would be wonderful together, but overall, I see him staying as a Dodger. You call up Beatty, Clifford, Vassell, and Tidwell. Not in the postseason, so that's a no on everybody. But eventually, Clifford will be here, Tidwell will be here, Vassell maybe, Beatty, I don't know. Stanek has been a lot better than I anticipated. Stanek looks fine. Looks like the guy the Mets traded for. I mean, as we have another comment about Stanek, he's been great, and he's a guy that he's had great postseason experience, had a proven track record before this year. He struggled this season, comes over to the Mets, and he struggled at first. I mean, we remember his first outing, he's giving up homers, but he was able to settle down and really get it going. So I've been very happy to see what they got from Stanek, and they need it. I mean, because as good as Diaz could be from time to time, you need more than one reliever, especially when your rotation's not going deep into ball games. I'll stay on here for a few more minutes. If you guys have any other questions, you could get them in. But once again, thank you all for watching, whether you're here before time, here now, in the future on playback. Make sure you're subscribing to the Mets Weekly channel, subscribing to my channel. Hitting a like on the stream really helps us out a lot. It allows more people to see it in their feed, break the YouTube algorithm. So we definitely appreciate likes. Anyone who's here on X, you guys are more than welcome to join this wonderful chat that we have. You could type in there. Sometimes the Twitter's X stuff could be a little weird, so it's easier to go to YouTube. Those chats come through nice and smoothly. So we definitely encourage you to come over here. But it definitely is a nice chunk of folks that we got here right now, so we really appreciate it. So who do I want to see the Mets signing going into next year? Stay tuned, Lane, because there'll be plenty of talk of that on the Mets Weekly channel, on my channel as well. So we're going to be getting into all of that once the Mets are officially, either they're eliminated or the Mets go all the way. We'll get to it eventually. So definitely stay tuned, Lane. You could ask all your questions and we'll get into it. Here's a good question. How and when do they use Senga in this next game? I still don't see Senga coming in until game 7. I feel like that's kind of the time. Sean Manaea has been so great that hopefully Manaea goes at least 6 innings again. Maybe could go 7 would be great. But after that, it's Stanek Diaz. I mean, that's what it comes down to. To me, Senga's not in that equation. I can't trust him right now with the mechanics thing. For game 7, that also depends on how Luis Severino does. If Severino's pitching good and you have your bullpen rested enough, you don't need him. So right now, I'd be trying to avoid Senga, because with what I saw, he doesn't look anywhere near the guy he's supposed to be. Velocity is way down, so his pitches were all over the place. He's spiking the ball. Ghost Fork wasn't looking spooky. So I did not like what I saw from Senga. We have a question from Ricardo. What are your top 4 relievers for the rest of the series? Basically, the circle of trust. That's a tough one. And the guy who slowly working his way in, that I have to at least consider him based on how it's gone. Can I put Danny Young in the circle? I don't know. It's tough because for Danny Young, he's had the results so far this series, but the moments he's coming in these mop up duties and these blowouts, it's hard to put too much stock into it. But he's one of the actual guys that's been effective and not giving up long balls left and right. Because right now, my other three are probably Garrett, Stanek, and Diaz. With Maton, he just can't miss bats. Budo, I just don't know. He's been all over the place. So I guess my fourth guy, if I had to have one, is maybe Danny Young. But then again, kind of could say David Pearson's been a reliever because he has for the most part. Today he made the start. Last random thought: did anyone see like three different pitchers slip off the mound tonight? Flaherty, Stanek, and someone else. I think we did. I mean, definitely with Stanek, I got a little worried. The mound is harder than usual with the cold, so I definitely feel like that was scary when I saw Stanek's foot kind of go out. I was worried because we just got finished talking about him. He's been great. You don't want to see an injury happen, especially to the mound being cold. So they got to sort that out. The grounds crew, if we're coming back here, we got to clean that up. Do you see Acuna getting any Bs or just inserting him as a pinch runner? I feel like they've kind of made their bed, so to speak, as like Acuna as a pinch runner, and that's what they're sticking with. It's too late now. It's too big of a spot now to try something else. He's just sticking with it. When Iglesias was struggling, I had the thought of maybe putting Acuna out there because of getting the experience. Because the way I look at it, Acuna is a piece going forward. He's a long-term guy that I want to keep. Iglesias, if they're able to retain him, great, but he's not going to be here for a long, long time. Acuna could be. So I want him to get his postseason experience now, get his first-time jitters, get all that stuff out of the way now. This way, when we come back with a team with higher expectations, with a more complete team, Acuna is ready for the moment. So they opted for McNeil. He got the sac flies today, but I wish Acuna did get some starts at some points in this postseason. But at this point, it's not going to happen. They kind of made their decision on that already. Who's pitching for the Mets in Game 6? Sean Manaea will be making the start in Game 6. Budo isn't the same pitcher from the time he gave the homer in San Diego. That's a good point, Ricardo. He's definitely had some struggles, and I feel like just that overall adjusting to a reliever has kind of bothered him. He got off to a good start with it. Then I feel like that workload, he's still getting adjusted to it. He still has to figure out the strike zone as well. He falls behind in counts. And then what happens is that when you fall behind in counts, he grooves them, goes over the fence. Stanek has frequent back problems, so that would have been ideal. Oh, I mean, no doubt. We can't lose any more guys. Absolutely not, especially in the bullpen. We got enough injuries there. We don't want to lose anybody else. Everyone needs to stay healthy. So speaking of staying healthy, I'm going to do that unless we have any final questions. Again, thank you everyone who watched. We will be back Sunday trying to get a pregame in and a postgame for Game 6 in Los Angeles. Sean and I on the mound against the Dodgers bullpen. So Mets have a really good shot now. They won today. I feel they have a really good chance for Game 6. And then Game 7 could go either way. That's what you play for. You play to get to Game 7. And then pitching for Game 7 is Luis Severino. That's correct. That seems like the plan right now. Unless last minute they switch it to Sanga, but I don't see it happening. Severino, there's been mixed results, but he'll be the guy getting the ball in Game 7. So if we don't have anything else, we will end it right there. So once again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, TikTok, all that fun stuff. And until the next one, let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time.